The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast metal cave. Hundreds of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose up toward the ceiling. Strange creatures from dozens of worlds sat together, their voices mixing into a low hum that filled the air. Some looked like giant insects with shiny shells. Others glowed with soft light that changed colors as they moved. A few had too many arms or eyes in places that seemed wrong to human sight. Captain Jake Morrison stood alone on the speaking platform in the center of the hall. His blue uniform looked plain and simple compared to the fancy clothes and natural armor of the aliens around him. The small patch on his chest showed the symbol of Earth Space Fleet. Next to it was another patch with the name of his ship, UES Wanderer. Jake held a datapad in his hands. On it were the plans and numbers that described his ship. He had come here to offer help in the war against the Zephyrians. The Zephyrians were bad news. They had been taking over star systems for months now. Their ships were huge and their weapons could destroy entire planets. Every free world in the galaxy was scared of them, but the aliens in the council hall did not look scared. They looked amused. Jake could hear quiet laughter coming from different parts of the room. Some of the creatures were making sounds that he guessed were jokes in their own languages. A tall, insect-like being stood up from one of the front seats. His body was covered in hard green plates that clicked together when he moved. 4 arms extended from his sides, each ending in sharp claws. His head was triangular with large black eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. "I am Commander Veltar of the Krunian Federation," the creature said. His voice came out as a series of clicks and buzzes, but the translation device in the room changed it into words Jake could understand. "Human Captain Morrison, we have looked at the information about your ship. We are ... confused." More laughter rippled through the hall. Jake felt his face get warm, but he kept his expression calm. "Confused about what, Commander?" Jake asked. Veltar's mandibles clicked together, and what Jake realized was the Krunian way of showing amusement. "Your ship is very small. Our cargo vessels are bigger than your warship. How can such a tiny craft help us fight the Zephyrians?" Another alien rose from her seat. This one looked more like a human, but her skin was silver and she had 4 arms instead of 2. Her movements were smooth and graceful, like a dancer. Jake recognized her as Admiral Nixara from the Centauri Alliance. "The Krunian commander raises a good point," she said. Her voice was musical, with a slight echo that made it sound like she was speaking from far away. "Humans have only been traveling between stars for 200 years. The rest of us have been doing this for thousands of years. Perhaps this matter should be left to more experienced civilizations." Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he pushed it down. He had expected this. Earth was new to the galactic community. Their ships were smaller than most alien vessels. Their technology looked primitive compared to what other species had built, but Jake knew something these aliens did not know. "The Wanderer may not look impressive by your standards," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "But human engineering focuses on making things work better, not just making them bigger." The hall erupted in what could only be called polite laughter. The sound was strange because it came from so many different types of creatures. Some clicked, some buzzed, some made musical tones. But Jake could tell they were all laughing at him. A new voice spoke up from the back of the hall. This one belonged to a being that looked like it was made of living light trapped inside a crystal shell. The Arcturian ambassador glowed brighter. As it spoke, "We appreciate humanity's enthusiasm," the being said, "but this is a matter for real warships. The Zephyrians have vessels that are 15 kilometers long. Their weapons can crack moons in half. Perhaps your little ship could carry supplies or wounded soldiers instead of trying to fight." Jake gripped his datapad tighter. These aliens saw only the size and shape of his ship. They did not understand what made it special. They looked at the smooth gray hull and the simple design and thought it was weak. They had no idea what the Wanderer could really do. "We understand your concerns," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But Earth's fleet wants to contribute to this war effort. We're not asking for a leading role in the battle. We just want to help. Commander Veltar S. Forearms gestured dismissively. Very well, your ship can join the fleet when we gather at Kepler Station. But you will stay in the back with the medical ships and supply vessels. Real warships will handle the fighting. Admiral Nixara nodded in agreement. It is settled then. The human vessel will serve as support. This meeting is closed. As the aliens began to leave their seats, Jake stood alone on the platform. He watched them go, their strange forms moving toward the exits like a parade of living nightmares and dreams. Some of them were still making amused sounds as they passed him. Jake finally stepped down from the platform and walked toward the exit. His boots made hollow sounds on the metal floor. As he reached the door, he heard one last comment from a group of aliens nearby. Did you see how small their ship is? I bet my personal transport has more firepower. Poor humans. They try so hard to be important. At least they'll be safe in the back where they belong. Jake stopped walking for a moment. He turned his head slightly and spoke just loud enough for the aliens to hear him. Let them laugh, he said quietly. They'll see what human cleverness can do. Then he walked out of the hall and headed back to his ship. The Wanderer was waiting for him at the docking bay. It looked small and plain compared to the huge alien vessels around it, but Jake knew the truth. He knew what was hidden inside that simple gray hull. Soon the whole galaxy would know too. 3 weeks had passed since the meeting at the Galactic Council. Now Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Wanderer, looking out at the most amazing sight he had ever seen. The combined fleet of the galaxy stretched out before him like a city made of metal and light floating in the darkness of space. Hundreds of alien warships filled the area around Kepler Station. Each one was different, built by a different species with their own ideas about how a fighting ship should look. The Krunian vessels were the biggest, each one like a floating mountain covered in weapons. Their hulls were dark gray with red lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. Gun turrets stuck out from every surface, and Jake could count at least 50 weapon ports on each ship. The Arcturian ships were completely different. They looked like someone had captured pieces of stars and shaped them into vessels. Their hulls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with inner light. The light changed colors as Jake watched, shifting from blue to green to gold. These ships moved without making any sound, drifting through space like ghosts. The Centauri Alliance had brought their own fleet. Their ships were long and thin, shaped like swords or spears. They were painted in silver and moved with quick, sharp turns that reminded Jake of hunting animals. Energy crackled along their hulls, and he could see weapon systems that looked like they could cut through anything. There were ships from dozens of other species, too. Some looked like living creatures with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to breathe. Others were perfect geometric shapes covered in armor plates and gun turrets. A few were so strange that Jake could not figure out which end was the front. In the middle of all these impressive warships sat the UES Wanderer. At 800 meters long, it was tiny compared to the alien vessels around it. The Krunian ships were 10 times bigger. Even the smallest alien fighters were almost as large as Jake's entire ship. The Wanderer's hull was a dull gray color that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. No obvious weapons could be seen on the outside, which made many of the aliens think it was some kind of scout ship or transport vessel. Lieutenant Amy Carter stood at the tactical station. Behind Jake, she was young, maybe 25 years old, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She had been watching the alien fleet formations on her screens for the past hour. Sir, she said, looking up from her display, Fleet Command has given us our position. We're assigned to the rear guard along with the medical ships and supply vessels. Jake nodded. He had expected this. The aliens still did not take the Wanderer seriously. They saw it as a small, weak ship that needed to be protected. How is the crew handling this? Jake asked. Chief Engineer Pete Collins looked up from his station. He was an older man with gray hair and hands that were always slightly dirty from working on the ship's systems. He had been with the space fleet for 20 years and had helped design some of the Wanderer's most important parts. The men are frustrated, sir, Pete said. They know what this ship can really do. But these aliens treat us like we're flying an old museum piece. Some of the crew are starting to get angry about it. Jake understood how they felt. Every person on the Wanderer was a volunteer. They had all joined this mission knowing they might not come back. They wanted to fight, to show what humans could do. Being stuck in the back with the support ships felt like an insult. A calm female voice spoke from the ship's communication system. It was Dr. Lisa Parker, the ship's artificial intelligence. Her voice always sounded friendly and professional, like a teacher explaining something important. "Captain," Dr. Parker said, "long-range sensors are picking up movement in the outer part of the system. The Zephyrian fleet is arriving." Jake turned to look at the main viewing screen. At first, he could not see anything except stars and the dark of space. Then the computer enhanced the image, and he could make out shapes moving in the distance. The Zephyrian ships were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They looked like they were alive, made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed with internal light. The smallest ones were still bigger than most of the alien warships in the combined fleet. The largest ship, which had to be their flagship, was over 15 kilometers long. It looked like a massive crystal spear pointed directly at the Allied fleet. As Jake watched, more and more Zephyrian ships appeared. They moved in perfect formation like a school of deadly fish swimming through the dark water of space. Their hulls glowed with different colors, and energy seemed to flow between them like they were all connected somehow. Commander Troy Davis, the ship's second-in-command, stood next to Jake. He was a tall man with dark skin and a serious expression. He had been Jake's friend since they were both young officers, and Jake trusted his judgment completely. "Sir," Troy said quietly, "I count at least 200 enemy ships. Some of them are bigger than anything we've ever seen." Amy's voice came from behind them. "Captain, I'm getting readings from the enemy fleet. Their power levels are incredible. Each one of their main ships has more firepower than an entire Krunian battle group." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The combined fleet was impressive, but the Zephyrians had brought their entire war machine. This was going to be the biggest space battle in the history of the galaxy. Admiral Nick Zara's voice came through the communication system. Her musical tones sounded tense and worried. "All ships prepare for battle stations," she announced. "The Zephyrian fleet is larger than our intelligence reports indicated. This will be the most difficult fight any of us have ever faced." Jake looked around at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his orders. These people had followed him across the galaxy to fight in this war. They believed in their ship and in each other. They deserved better than being stuck in the back row while others did the fighting. "Dr. Parker," Jake said, "run a full diagnostic on all our main systems. I want everything ready for combat." "All systems are operating at peak efficiency, Captain," the AI replied. "The ship is ready for whatever you need it to do." Pete looked up from his engineering station. "Sir, the main power core is stable. All weapon systems are online and charged. We're ready to fight." Jake nodded and turned back to the viewing screen. The Zephyrian fleet was getting closer. Soon, the battle would begin. The aliens in the combined fleet still thought the Wanderer was just a small, weak ship that needed to be protected. They had no idea what human engineering could really accomplish. "Remember," Jake said to his crew, "we're not here to impress these aliens. We're here to end this war. When the time comes, we'll show them what the Wanderer can really do." The bridge fell quiet as everyone focused on their stations. Outside, the largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a small gray ship waited for its moment to change everything. The space battle started like thunder rolling across the sky. The first shots came from the Krunian ships, their massive plasma cannons lighting up the darkness with beams of burning energy. Each blast was powerful enough to destroy a city. But in the vast emptiness of space, they looked like bright lines drawn across the stars. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Wanderer as the two fleets crashed together. The alien ships moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons firing in waves. The Arcturian vessels danced between the enemy ships, their crystal hulls glowing brighter as they charged their space-bending weapons. When they fired, reality itself seemed to twist and bend around their targets. The Centauri Alliance ships moved like silver arrows, darting in and out of the battle with incredible speed. Their weapons crackled with energy, leaving trails of light as they struck at the Zephyrian fleet. Explosions bloomed everywhere, each one like a small sun being born and dying in seconds, but the Zephyrians were ready for them, their crystal ships absorbed the incoming fire, their living hulls channeling the energy through their bodies like blood through veins. When they fired back, their weapons were devastating. Beams of pure destruction lanced out from their ships, punching through the armor of the Allied vessels like they were made of paper. Jake watched in horror as one of the Crunian dreadnoughts took a direct hit from a Zephyrian weapon. The massive ship, which had seemed so powerful and unstoppable, simply broke apart. Its hull cracked like an egg, and atmosphere and debris spilled out into space. The explosion that followed lit up half the battlefield. "Sir," Amy called from her station, "we're losing ships faster than the battle plan predicted. The Zephyrian weapons are much more powerful than our intelligence report said." Jake could see the truth of her words on the tactical display. Red markers showed where Allied ships had been destroyed. There were too many of them already, and the battle had only been going on for 10 minutes. Commander Troy Davis stood next to Jake, his hands clenched into fists. "We should be out there, sir. The Wanderer could help. We're just sitting back here watching our allies get destroyed." Jake felt the same frustration. His ship was powerful, more powerful than any of the aliens realized. But they had been ordered to stay in the rear with the support vessels. The alien commanders still thought the Wanderer was too weak to join the real fighting. Dr. Parker's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Captain, I am detecting massive energy buildup in the Zephyrian flagship. Power levels are beyond anything in our database." Jake looked at the main viewing screen. The enemy flagship, that enormous crystal spear that was 15 kilometers long, had been hanging back from the main battle. Now it was starting to glow with an inner fire that grew brighter by the second. Energy danced along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "What are they doing?" Amy asked, her voice tight with worry. The answer came from Admiral Nixara, her musical voice now filled with panic. "All ships, emergency maneuvers. The flagship is charging some kind of super weapon. All vessels, get away from the main battle area." But there was nowhere to run. The weapon's energy field was spreading outward from the flagship, covering the entire battlefield. The Allied ships tried to escape, but they were too close to the fighting to get away in time. Jake could see the fear in his crew's faces. They had all heard stories about Zephyrian super weapons. Entire planets had been destroyed by them. If that flagship fired its weapon, it would wipe out the entire Allied fleet in one shot. "Captain," Pete said from his engineering station, "the flagship's power readings are impossible. It's like they're drawing energy from space itself." The Zephyrian flagship continued to charge its weapon. The crystal surface of the ship was now blazing with light so bright that the viewing screen had to dim itself to protect everyone's eyes. Energy crackled between the ship's spines, and space around it began to bend and twist. "Sir," Amy said, her voice barely above a whisper, "at this rate, that weapon will be ready to fire in less than 2 minutes." Jake made his decision. He had watched too many good ships and brave people die already. The alien commanders had kept the Wanderer out of the fight because they thought it was weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Amy," Jake said, his voice calm and steady, "target the Zephyrian flagship. Prepare the Nova Cannon." The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone knew what the Nova Cannon was. It was the reason the Wanderer had been built. It was the most powerful weapon human science had ever created. But it had never been fired in actual combat. The power levels were so high that some scientists had said it was impossible to build. "Sir," Amy said, her fingers hovering over her controls, "are you sure?" "Once we fire the Nova Cannon, there's no hiding what we can do." Jake nodded. "The time for hiding is over. These aliens think we're weak because our ship is small. They're About to learn that size doesn't matter when you have the right weapon. Amy's fingers danced over her control panel. Targeting solution locked on the flagship. Nova cannon is charging. The Wanderer began to change. The gray hull that had looked so plain and simple started to glow with internal light. Panels slid open along the ship's nose, revealing the barrel of the Nova cannon. It was only 3 meters across, tiny compared to the massive guns on the alien ships. But the energy readings coming from it were incredible. "Sir," Pete reported, "Nova cannon is at 50% charge. All power systems are stable." The Zephyrian flagship's weapon was almost ready to fire. The crystal ship blazed like a star, and space around it rippled with energy distortions. The Allied fleet was trapped, unable to escape the weapon's range. "Captain," Dr. Parker said, "the enemy weapon will be ready to fire in 30 seconds. Jake looked around at his crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy to fight in this war. They had endured the insults and mockery of the Alien Council. They had watched from the sidelines as their allies died. Now it was their turn to show what humanity could do. "Nova cannon at full charge," Amy reported, "ready to fire on your command." Jake took a deep breath. Everything they had worked for, everything they had sacrificed, came down to this moment. The aliens had laughed at humanity's weak warship. They were about to see what human engineering could really accomplish. The Zephyrian flagship's weapon reached critical power. The crystal ship pulsed with energy that made the stars themselves seem dim. In seconds it would fire and destroy the entire Allied fleet. Jake's finger hovered over the firing control. Fire! The Nova cannon fired. For one heartbeat, nothing seemed to happen. The Wanderer hung motionless in space, its gray hull now glowing with strange energy that rippled across its surface like water. Then something impossible began to occur. Space itself started to bend around the front of the small human ship. The stars behind it twisted and stretched, as if someone was pulling them through invisible glass. The darkness between the stars seemed to fold in on itself, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Then the beam emerged. It was not like any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. The other ships in the fleet fired energy beams or plasma bolts or missiles. The Nova cannon fired something else entirely. It fired concentrated starlight, the power of a dying sun compressed into a stream of pure white energy that cut through space. Like a sword made of light itself, the beam was only 3 meters wide, but it carried more power than anything the aliens had ever imagined. As it traveled toward the Zephyrian flagship, it left a trail of bent space behind it. The gravitational effects were so strong that nearby asteroids were pulled off course and small. Pieces of debris were sucked into the beam's path. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Wanderer as his ship's ultimate weapon crossed the distance to the enemy flagship. The beam moved faster than anything should be able to move, crossing millions of kilometers in less than a second. Around him, his crew held their breath. The Zephyrian flagship was still charging its own super weapon when the Nova cannon's beam struck it. The massive crystal ship, 15 kilometers of living rock and energy, was there one moment and gone the next. It did not explode, it did not break apart. It simply ceased to exist, as if it had never been there at all, but the beam did not stop. It continued through the space where the flagship had been, striking the 2 Zephyrian ships that had been positioned directly behind it. They too vanished without a trace, their crystal hulls unable to absorb or deflect the impossible energy that hit them. The beam finally began to fade after traveling nearly 1,000,000 kilometers through space. When it was gone, there was nothing left where 3 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had been floating just seconds before. No debris, no explosion, no trace that they had ever existed. The entire battlefield fell silent. Both the Allied fleet and the remaining Zephyrian ships stopped fighting and hung motionless in space. Every crew member, human and alien alike, stared at the empty space where the enemy flagship had been. Amy was the first to speak on the Wanderer's bridge. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sir, the flagship is gone. Completely gone. Sensors show no trace of it anywhere." Jake slumped back in his captain's chair. The weight of what they had just done settled on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. They had built a weapon that could erase ships from existence. They had kept it secret from the rest of the galaxy. And now they had used it to end the biggest space battle in galactic history. Commander Troy Davis stood next to Jake's chair, his face pale with shock. Jake, what did we just do? That ship was 15 kilometers long. It just disappeared. We did what we had to do, Jake said quietly. We stopped them from destroying the Allied fleet. The communication system crackled to life. Admiral Nixara's musical voice came through, but now it carried a tone of amazement and fear that Jake had never heard before. Captain Morrison, she said, by the 7 moons of Arcturus, what kind of weapon was that? Our sensors recorded energy levels that should be impossible. Before Jake could answer, Commander Veltar's clicking voice joined the conversation. Human. Ship, you will explain this weapon immediately. No species in the galaxy has technology that advanced? Jake looked around at his crew. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing it might be their last. They had endured the mockery and dismissal of the alien council. They had watched their allies die while being forced to stay in the rear guard. Now they had revealed humanity's greatest secret. The weapon is called the Nova Cannon, Jake said over the open channel. It uses technology that human scientists have been developing for 50 years. We compressed the energy of a stellar collapse into a focused beam. The silence that followed was even deeper than before. Jake could imagine the alien commanders trying to understand what he had just told them. They had thought humans were primitive, barely capable of space travel. Now they had learned that humanity had built a weapon that could destroy their most powerful ships with a single shot. Dr. Parker's calm voice broke the silence on the bridge. Captain, the remaining Zephyrian ships are breaking formation. They appear to be retreating. Jake looked at the tactical display. The enemy fleet, which had seemed so confident and powerful just minutes before, was falling apart. Without their flagship and its superweapon, they had lost their will to fight. The crystal ships were turning away from the battle, their formations scattered and broken. Sir, Amy reported, I'm getting surrender signals from several of the smaller Zephyrian vessels. They're requesting permission to withdraw from the system, Jake nodded. The war was over. The Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered dozens of star systems, had been broken by a single shot from a human weapon they had never imagined could exist. Pete looked up from his engineering station. Captain, the Nova Cannon is powering down. All systems are stable. We can fire again if needed. That won't be necessary, Jake said. He opened the channel to the entire fleet. This is Captain Morrison of the UES Wanderer. The Nova Cannon is now offline. We're transmitting our current weapon specifications to all Allied command ships. Earth is honored to serve alongside such brave allies. The response was immediate. Dozens of voices came through the communication system, all speaking at once, in different languages. The translation system could barely keep up with all the different species trying to talk at the same time. Captain Morrison, the Crunian Federation wishes to discuss technology sharing agreements. Human vessel, the Arcturian Collective would like to invite your species to join our research programs. Captain, the Centauri Alliance formally requests that Earth consider a full military partnership. Jake smiled for the first time since the battle began. 3 hours ago, these same aliens had been laughing at humanity's small, weak warship. They had assigned the Wanderer to the rear guard with the supply ships. They had treated Earth like a minor species that barely deserved to be in the same fleet. Now they were all trying to become humanity's best friend. We appreciate all the offers, Jake said diplomatically. Earth looks forward to working with all of our new allies in the years to come. As the Allied fleet began to regroup and the Zephyrian ships retreated into deep space, Jake stood on the bridge of the Wanderer and looked out at the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had announced its arrival not with words or diplomacy, but with a demonstration of power that no one could ignore. The species that had been mocked for their small ships and simple technology had just proven that in the vast universe it was not the size of your weapons that mattered. It was the intelligence of the minds that built them. 1 week after the battle at Kepler Station, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the same great hall where the aliens had laughed at him, but everything was different now. The curved seats were filled with the same strange creatures from dozens of worlds, but their attitude had completely changed. Instead of amusement and mockery, Jake could see respect and even fear in their alien eyes. The news of the battle had spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species, every world, every space station had heard about the small human ship that had ended the war with a single shot. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just days before, had surrendered completely. Their remaining fleets had retreated to their home systems and were asking for peace talks. Jake wore the same simple blue uniform he had worn before. The patches on his chest still showed the symbol of Earth's space fleet and the name of his ship. But now when the aliens looked at those patches, they saw something different. They saw the symbol of a species that had fooled them all. Commander Veltar stood up from his front row seat. The tall insect creature's green plates clicked together as he moved, but the sound was different now. Less confident, more careful. His forearms gestured toward Jake with what looked like a formal bow. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said, his translated voice carrying a tone of deep respect. "The Krunian Federation wishes to formally apologize for our earlier words. We did not understand the true capabilities of human technology." Admiral Nixara rose from her seat as well. The silver-skinned woman with 4 arms moved with the same graceful motions, but her posture was different. She looked at Jake like he was something dangerous that she needed to be careful around. "The Centauri Alliance also wishes to apologize," she said. "We judged your ship by its size and appearance. We did not realize that human engineers had developed weapons beyond our understanding." Jake nodded politely. "We accept your apologies. Earth understands that first impressions can be misleading." The Arcturian ambassador, the being of light, trapped in crystal, pulsed with colors that Jake had learned meant embarrassment and shame. "The Arcturian Collective has studied the energy readings from your weapon. Our scientists say it should be impossible to build such a device. How did humans achieve this breakthrough?" Jake smiled slightly. "Human science has always focused on solving problems that others think cannot be solved. We looked at the basic forces of the universe and asked ourselves, what if we could control them?" A new voice spoke from the back of the hall. It belonged to a creature that looked like a living tree with eyes scattered across its bark-like skin. Jake recognized it as the ambassador from the Sylvani Republic, a species known for their advanced knowledge of physics. "Captain Morrison," the tree being said, "our analysis shows that your weapon channels the energy of stellar collapse. The power requirements should be beyond any ship-based reactor. How do you generate such massive amounts of energy?" Jake had expected this question. Earth scientists had debated how much to reveal about their technology. In the end, they had decided that some secrets were worth sharing, while others needed to stay hidden. The Nova Cannon uses a controlled fusion reaction that mimics the core processes of a dying star, Jake explained. "We compress matter to densities that were thought impossible, then release the energy in a focused beam." The hall buzzed with excited conversation as the aliens discussed this revelation among themselves. Jake could hear fragments of their talk through the translation systems. They were amazed that humans had managed to create such technology with only 2 centuries of space travel. Commander Valtar's mandibles clicked together in what Jake now recognized as deep thought. "Captain, the Krunian Federation would like to propose a full military alliance with Earth. We believe our combined fleets could bring peace to the entire galaxy." "The Centauri Alliance makes the same offer," Admiral Nixara added quickly. "We would be honored to have human ships in our battle groups." Similar offers came from around the hall. The Arcturians wanted to share research programs. The Sylvani Republic offered to teach human scientists about advanced physics. The Hegemony of Worlds wanted to establish trade agreements that would make Earth rich beyond imagination. Jake listened to all the offers with a calm expression. Inside, he was amazed at how quickly things had changed. A week ago, these same aliens had treated humanity like children playing with toys. Now they were all trying to become Earth's closest allies. Earth appreciates all these generous offers, Jake said. But we must remember why we fought this war in the first place. The Zephyrian Empire was conquering innocent worlds and enslaving entire species. We didn't reveal our weapons to gain power or wealth. We did it to stop them from hurting others. The hall fell quiet as the aliens considered his words. Jake continued speaking, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Humanity will share our technology with species that use it to protect the innocent. We will form alliances with those who believe in freedom and peace. But we will not give our weapons to anyone who wants to use them for conquest or control. Commander. Veltar's forearms spread wide in a gesture of agreement. The Krunian Federation accepts these terms. We swear by our ancient codes that we will use any shared technology only for defense. One by one, the other species made similar promises. They all wanted access to human technology, but they were willing to accept Earth's conditions. Jake could see the fear in their eyes. They had all realized the same thing. If humans could build one impossible weapon, they could probably build others. As the meeting continued, Jake thought about the journey that had brought him here. The Wanderer was still docked at Kepler Station, undergoing repairs and upgrades. His crew was being treated like heroes by the other species. Earth was receiving visitors from across the galaxy, all wanting to establish diplomatic relations, but Jake also thought about the responsibility that came with such power. The Nova Cannon had ended the war, but it had also changed everything. Humanity was no longer the small, weak species that others could ignore. They were now one of the major powers in the galaxy, and with that power came the duty to use it wisely. After the meeting ended, Jake walked through the corridors of the station back to his ship. Aliens that had once ignored him now stepped aside and bowed as he passed. Some looked at him with admiration, others with fear. A few seemed to be trying to figure out what other surprises humanity might be hiding. When Jake reached the Wanderer, he found his crew waiting for him on the bridge. Amy, Troy, Pete, and the others had all become famous throughout the galaxy. Their faces were on news broadcasts from thousands of worlds. But they were still the same people who had followed him into battle. So, Captain, Amy said with a grin, what did the council decide? Are we heroes or are we scary monsters? Jake laughed. A little bit of both, I think. They want to be our friends, but they're also afraid of what we might do if we become their enemies, Troy nodded thoughtfully. That's probably the best position for Earth to be in, respected but not taken for granted. Dr. Parker's voice came through the ship's communication system. Captain, I have been monitoring galactic communications. The Zephyrian Empire has formally requested peace negotiations. They are offering to return all conquered territories and pay reparations for the war. Jake smiled. Then our mission is complete. We came here to stop a war, and we did it. Pete looked up from his engineering station. Sir, I've been thinking about the Nova Cannon. Now that everyone knows we have it, they're going to want to build their own versions. Should we be worried about that? Jake considered the question. It was true that other species would try to copy human technology. Some might succeed, others might fail. But that was the nature of progress. Knowledge always spread, whether you wanted it to or not. Let them try, Jake said finally. The Nova Cannon took 50 years of human research to develop. Even if they succeed in copying it, we'll have 50 years to develop something even better. As the Wanderer prepared to leave Kepler Station and return to Earth, Jake stood on the bridge looking out at the stars. The galaxy was a different place now. Humanity had proven that they belonged among the great powers of the universe. They had shown that cleverness and determination could overcome size and tradition. The species that had once laughed at humanity's weak warship would never make that mistake again. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.